Welcome to the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today, we are doing our long-awaited 2024 Great Loop Completion Stats episode. So we're excited to announce which boat makes were the top 10 for 2024 loop completions, and we'll give you a couple of the other stats along the way as well, too. Brent Bowlin with Great Loop Yacht Sales will be joining me in just a moment. Before we bring Brent in, I do want to take a moment to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners and viewers to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And one of those businesses, of course, is Great Loop Yacht Sales. Brent Bowlin, one of the partners in Great Loop Yacht Sales, thanks for joining me.
Kim, thank you so much for having me on the call today. I'm so excited about this podcast and, every year. So this is always what everybody wants to hear, who's out there finishing the loop and what boat. So it's always such a good one to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think it really helps a lot of people who, perhaps know they're in the market for a Great Loop boat, but don't know where to start. This is the top 10. We're going to go through them in a minute. There's probably 50 or more boat makes that completed the loop last year. So we're not at all trying to steer you towards any of these. However, these are great starting points if you're kind of trying to figure out where to go with it. So should we jump in?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, I think it's not going to be a surprise to anyone. The perennial favorite on the Great Loop is the Mainship. In 2024, it was again in the first place position for the most loop completions by any boat make. And the 2024 number was 31. So quite a few of them out there on the loop last year.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about what makes the Mainship so popular year after year with loopers.
Kim, it's so funny. I was, thinking about Mainships and to compare it sort of to the car industry, right? That the number one selling car in America for years, and I don't know if it still is today, but for years was the Toyota Camry. And I think the Mainship brand is kind of the Toyota Camry of the water, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
The Mainship offers the perfect balance, or I shouldn't say perfect, but a great balance of affordability, practicality, and comfort. And I think for a lot of loopers, the comfort and safety that Mainships offer, through their incredibly wide side decks, no ladders, molded steps, easy to get around. They're great for cruising couples. If you get the larger Mainship, even a small family, it's a great boat on the Mainship 430. There's incredible visibility around the boat. And so you put in that with the affordability of them, the practicality, it really is a wonderful boat to do the loop on.
Absolutely. And our members clearly agree with you on that, Brent, because it's for as long as we've been compiling these stats, Mainship has been in the number one position. So are any of the specific models of the Mainship, more prevalent than others, or is it just run the gamut on Mainships?
They're really all the models. Mainship's kind of interesting. If you are somebody that's looking for two heads, right? The only model that's going to have that is the what's called the Mainship 430 aft cabin. All the other Mainship models that you typically see on the loop are going to be a single head. Many of them are single staterooms. They do offer the Mainships in both, twin engines as well as single engines. And on the loop, if you're going to be going 8 knots, the single engine is a really fuel efficient option to go with. Many of those have bow and stern thrusters, which help with docking. And so it can really be a great mix. So everything from the 34 trawler up to the 430 sedan, they tend to be able to go around the loop. They're kind of, miles and miles, kind of like a Toyota Camry, right? They just keep going, and then they could do the loop multiple times. And so they've served a lot of great purposes for doing the loop.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some Mainships that the same boat with different owners have gone around the loop 4 and 5 times, I think it is now. So certainly a perennial favorite. Let's move
Absolutely.
on to number two, shall we?
Yeah.
All right, number two, I believe, is in the same number two position as last year, and that is the Carver. So tell us how this differs from the Mainship and some of the models that are popular for loopers on the Carvers.
Yeah, I think Carvers are really popular for a few reasons, but a lot of the Carvers are the aft cabin models. And I think that is a nice transition from home life to boat life because it gives you a little more space, especially in that typically the aft cabin is the owner's cabin, which gives you a little more walk around bed space, like a queen size bed, kind of bigger heads, bathroom areas or head areas. So the Carver, 406, 466, cockpit motor yacht, the 444, Carver 444, and even really large Carvers like the Carver 506. Those are all the aft cabin models, but we'll see Carver 53s, Carver 56s, which is more of a sedan version, but they offer so much living space, multiple staterooms, really big galleys, expansive salons, so their ability to combine that comforts of home, but also giving you performance if you want them. So people that don't maybe always want to go that trawler speed, they want to be able to go fast if they want, but kind of still have that live aboard convenience. It's pretty nice. I mean, it's a good package to get all that, but also still have the speed.
Yeah, and this is, I don't have a statistic on this, a little bit more anecdotally, looking at the list of boats, and then also looking at some of our 2025 upcoming fleet. It seems like a good portion of the bigger boats on the list, lengthwise, happen to be Carvers. So, there's something about the larger Carvers that seems to be pretty popular right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So number three is actually a tie between two pretty different boats. So let's start with the Grand Banks, with 13 Grand Banks that completed the Great Loop last year. Um, I believe this is kind of the only kind of old school slow trawler that made the list. So there's this perception that the loop is done on a trawler. And I think maybe 10 years ago that might have been more true. So why is it, what makes the Grand Banks popular, first of all, but why is it, do you think, that it is also one of the only slow trawlers that made the list this year?
Yeah. Wow. It's so nice, right? Grand Banks is such an incredible boat. They're known for their timeless craftsmanship, seaworthiness, fuel efficiency, long-range cruising. Um, I think to your point though, the perception of the loop being done mostly on trawlers, it is shifting, right? Um, I think there's a lot of factors that push that, but one of the things is, the typical kind of loop boat is, as far as averages, and correct me here if I'm off a little bit, but just from what I see in my experience is around 40 to 45 feet, about 20 years old, and around 250-ish thousand dollars is kind of that typical, average loop boat. And so some of these boats are aging out of that, if you will, that are in that affordability price range. And the 20-year mark, I think, help. It's getting easier, but there has been insurance struggles on doing boat insurance, and so some of that could have been over from that part of it. But I do think there's a segment of loopers that maybe are wanting to be able to go at a faster speed when they can because of maybe tighter schedules, being able to go back and maybe maintain jobs or take care of grandkids or what have you. And so maybe that's why we're getting less trawlers. So all just kind of guesses on my part, but some things I'm seeing, in the marketplace, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you're right about those guesses. I think they're also, as they are aging, a lot of the kind of 1980s and early 90s built trawlers, maybe are getting a little bit beyond their Great Loop life expectancy. Um, and financing and insurance, as you mentioned, on the older boats can sometimes be a challenge. So I agree with you. Those are probably some of the reasons. I also agree with you on those averages you threw out, but I do have the statistic for the average boat length for the loop completions for 2024. So the average boat length was 40.8 feet, and it's been pretty consistent between 40 feet and 41 feet for as long as we've been tracking this. So it was still right in that line, maybe skewed up. I think the year before it was 40.3 or something along that line, but certainly in that same range. Um, the biggest boat that completed last year was a 65-foot outer reef, which is interestingly about 30 feet smaller than the biggest boat that finished in 2023. That was when we had a 94-footer that actually completed the loop. But so 2024, the largest boat was a 65-foot outer reef. And for the smallest boat was actually a Sea-Doo at 11 feet. So anything between 11 feet and 65 feet completed the Great Loop last year. As I mentioned, the tie for third place, the other the boat make that was tied for third place with 13 completions was the Ranger Tug, which is certainly very popular. Um, Go ahead and tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, so I like to refer to the Ranger Tug as kind of the Swiss Army knife of boats.
And it fits.
Yeah, yeah, everything on the boat does a couple jobs, right? So your helm seat ends up becoming an extension of your kitchen countertop. Your dinette becomes a bed. Everything's got a couple different uses. Flip this way and it's a table. Flip that way and it's your sofa to sit on in the cockpit. So love the Ranger Tugs, and those also tend to pull down the average length, I guess, of loop boats, but they're great boats. They have such a great appeal to solo loopers, couples. I think trailerable boats can be very popular as well to do the loop. Like if you're doing it in segments, maybe you just I had a school teacher I talked to, and they were just going to have the summer, and they were going to do the loop over several years. But during the summer, while she was off, they were going to trailer the boat and do a portion of the loop and then trailer it back home when she had to go back to school. So that compact size, user-friendly system, and they do tend to maintain resale value. So they're a favorite among loopers, I think, for those things, and they're relatively new. Most of them are, it's a newer model, and they also have become so popular, they've really expanded their product line. And so now there are Ranger tugs well into the 43, 45 range as well. They also, still have 20 that can do the loop. So
Yeah, I don't think I realized they got quite up to those 40-foot levels at this point, so that is good to know. Traditionally, though, and typically the Ranger tugs we see on the loop, what's kind of the range of those
yeah, it's a great point.
in
I
size?
think probably, yeah, most popular is probably the 27, the 29, and the 31. Um, the 27 specifically because it's an 8-foot beam, and so pulling it behind a regular car truck on the road, you don't need any special permits. When you get up to the 29 footer, it's a 10-foot beam, which does in some states require a little bit extra if you're going to tow it behind your vehicle. But I think that's probably those are the most popular on the loop.
Yeah, and they're, of course, as you said, popular with our segment loopers so that they can trailer the boat home. I've also spoken to a lot of loopers who plan to do cruising, take it out to Washington State, do the San Juan Islands, perhaps even take it up to Alaska, and then they're built out there, correct?
That is right. They're built out on the West Coast, and that's what my wife wants to do. So we went gold in 2020, and she says, "Hey, when we do this again, I'd like to do a trailerable boat." And we haven't come to an agreement on that, but we'll work on. That's kind of what she thinks. Is she thinks segment looping and being able to explore some of the other waterways around the United States would be really neat.
Okay, so that was the tie for third place. We have been through four boats, the Mainship, the Carver, the Grand Banks, and the Ranger Tug. And in fifth place, we have another tie, and that is Silverton and Sea Ray. So let's go ahead. We have a Silverton, and Silverton has creeped its way higher on the list. I think it first made the list last year, but it was at one of the lower numbers. So tell us why you think there's more perhaps Silvertons out there on the loop right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think the most popular boats, the Silverton 43 and the Silverton 453, have been really, really popular. And as a broker, those are boats that I want to list and sell because they have been so popular. They're great layouts. The Silverton 410, but the 43 and the 453, going back to those are both aft cabin motor yachts that offer kind of that Carver feel, but even bigger. One of the things that Silverton is known for is kind of their full beam salons, so windows at the edges of the boats, and the walkways are above that. So you go up some stairs to go down to the bow of the boat, but it just gives you this expansive salon in many of the Silverton designs. And the Silverton 453, a tremendous boat. We sold several of them this year, but it has a long hallway in the front of that boat and three large staterooms and a walk-in engine room. And so I think some people that want a lot more space are really looking for those Silvertons. And then They also give you the speed that you want when you want it. So all those boats can plane out and go super fast. They also have Cummins engines in many of the Silverton boats. And I think Cummins engines can be one of the better engines because they're so prevalent off of the water that
Mhm.
they're easy to find parts for and can sometimes be a little bit easier to find, repair workers to work on them and things like that. So I think those are some of the reasons Silvertons are so popular. And on the Sea Ray side, Sea Ray's just always built a really good boat. So and they're plentiful. And same thing, they're going to give you that speed and comfort that out on the loop. And I think that's what folks these days are looking for.
So, comparing the Sea Ray and the Silverton, are they comparable? I would consider them both kind of go fast looper boats, even though you can drive it at whatever speed you'd like. But, is there any differentiators between those two brands?
I mean, there are, but they're in general, they're pretty much the same boat, like big picture wise, as far as they both have sedan bridge, fly bridge. They both have aft cabin options. Quality and things like that, I would say they're pretty similar. I don't know, Michael might argue with me, who's my business partner right over this, but I would say one thing, Silverton might offer better engine room access than some of the Sea Rays. So I would give that to the Silverton. Some of the design, styling, look on the water, I'd probably give to Sea Ray. So it's kind of, you know, whichever one you want to go with, but they are very comparable on in and out of the water, I think, as far as designs and so forth. Yeah.
For sure. So, I guess we are up. Those were in tie for fifth, so that must make us up to number seven because that was five and six.
Yeah.
And that is Meridian with nine. I know Great Loop Yacht Sales had several Meridians listed this year and sold several Meridians. This is the third year that it's been kind of between number seven and number nine on our list. What are some of the Meridian models that attract loopers? And again, we're talking about, a motor yacht, go fast kind of boat again here with the Meridian. So as we said, not a lot of trawlers. These are all kind of the motor yacht style boats.
Yeah. And very similar to the Silverton and the Sea Ray, the Meridian has everything, 34 footer all the way up to 45, 46 footers and even 580s. So they have quite a range of boats. The Meridian group is owned by the same company that owns Sea Ray, was formed out of Bayliner, similar to how like Carver and Marquis, it's kind of one of our those different brands, but they build a wonderful boat. The 408, the 459, the 411, the 341, the 368, the 540 motor yacht and the 580 motor yacht are all Meridian brands. They're all really good, really innovative layouts, really good storage solutions, I think, very modern interiors. Most all of them are going to come with a bow and stern thruster, so ease of handling. They have strong performance out on the water too, so they give you the livability through the really good ways they're laid out. So they're great choices for families or a couple seeking a little more luxurious experience on the loop, I guess. But a great boat in Meridian, and they make for a great loop boat.
Yeah, there are beautiful boats for sure. From a style and looks perspective, they are certainly one of my favorites in this kind of category of boat. So very popular. The next one at number eight is Beneteau. We had eight Beneteaus finish the loop. Seven of those were swift trawlers. One was an Antares, which are pretty different boats. And then, of course, we also had, and we counted them separately, but we had three Beneteau sailboats that completed the Great Loop as well. But that's just such a different boat than the
Yeah.
motor yachts we're talking about. But so tell us about the swift trawler since that had seven, and if you want to mention the Antares briefly as well, please feel free. The swift trawler has always been an interesting boat to me because they launched the first one from our spring rendezvous several years ago. And it did its own loop quickly to show off the boat. But they started it, yeah, from our spring rendezvous in Norfolk. I want to say it was 2016, maybe. I don't remember exactly which year, but yeah, it was a real fun event. So tell us about them, the Swift Trawlers.
Yeah, as far as Swift Trawler and the Beneteau Swift Trawler is kind of like the newer main ship almost, right? So main ships, unfortunately, they don't build them anymore, and so Beneteau Swift Trawlers kind of come along, and I think it fills that gap really well. So they're very similar to like a Mainship 400 or Mainship 430. The design, layout, the comfort, the high side decks, the easy walkarounds, they really offer the space and features of a traditional trawler, but they have an incredible hull design that offers the ability to do really efficiently at those slower speeds, 8 to 10 miles an hour. But when you want to go to a higher cruising speed, they can absolutely jump up on plane and do that. So they're very luxurious interiors, and they have all that cutting edge technology with their hull. So they give you that comfort and stability and safety, but they also give you that speed if you want it as well. And
Mhm.
so it's pretty neat that there were so many Swift trawlers out there. A very neat boat and a great boat for the loop. The Antares is a really neat add as well. Specifically, I guess I'm kind of talking towards some of the newer Antares models. I think, or at least I personally feel, we're going to see more and more of those on the loop, and those are boats that have outboard motors. Some of the newer Antares do, starting with the Antares 9 or the 11, and it's a twin engine boat. And those I see competing with some of the Ranger Tugs. But then as you even get bigger, those could start competing with some of the Silvertons and Meridians and Sea Rays in that 39-foot range. But moving more from an inboard boat with those inboard diesels, typically we see on to an outboard boat. And that seems to be growing in popularity a little bit. And some of that has to do with Beneteau has a really good price point. Beneteau kind of similar to the Brunt group, and they own a lot of different boat brands. It's really good at using the spaces effectively and making I guess, using buying power to kind of keep prices down for the consumer. So I think we'll see more and more of that in the future.
Yeah, and the outboard certainly is becoming more and more popular in the larger boats. So it is interesting to see that shift and that trend continue to grow. Let's take a quick break. We'll play a message from a sponsor. When we come back, we'll give you the last two on our top 10 list, and we'll give you kind of the overall stats, which I don't think we've touched on exactly how many completions we've had in 2024. So we'll be back in a moment. An alternative to the high cost of brokerage and the hassle and risks of buy owner boat selling, YachtX.com makes selling your boat easy, safe, and produces better outcomes. Licensed and bonded, YachtX combines the comfort of professional advisors with the reach of multi-platform marketing and the convenience of web transaction management and escrow, so your experience is second to none. Best of all, with fees of just 1.5% or less, you save 85% or more in selling costs versus traditional brokerage. Ask them about their buyer representation rebates, YachtX Rewards referral program, and Looper discounts. Boaters come first at yachtx.com. Our friends at DockMate offer the world's most advanced, affordable, and safest wireless remote control system for your boat's engines, pods, thrusters, anchor, and horn. Once you activate the DockMate remote control with a simple push of a button, you are able to leave the helm where visibility is oftentimes limited, and then confidently and safely control your boat's movement from anywhere aboard. The result is less stress and a safer experience during typical docking maneuvers, particularly in tight marina slips and when navigating through locks, where potential damage might only be a matter of feet or just inches away. Learn more at dockmate.us. We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. My guest today is Brent Bowlin with Great Loop Yacht Sales. They are a yacht brokerage that can help you buy your Great Loop boat and sell it when you're ready to do so. And thank you for the Admiral level sponsorship, Brent. We appreciate your support. So we have gone through most of our top 10 list of 2024 loop completions. The final two were in a tie for ninth place, and those are Bayliner and Cruisers yachts. So I know you have a Cruisers yacht, so let's start there.
Yeah. So that's right. We did the loop back in 2020 aboard our cruisers yachts. We have a 4450. It's a aft cabin motor yacht, 3 staterooms, 2 heads, but there's a lot of different cruisers models. The 4050 is a 40-foot version. It's a 2 stateroom, 2 head layout. So some of those aft cabins, there's the Cruisers 500. I'm trying to think of some that have recently completed the 415. Those are all really good. The 455 is kind of the newer version of our boat. And then you've got some smaller ones in the 30 foot range that do the loop. But they're built here in the US up on Lake Michigan and Wisconsin. They're perfect for loopers that want a blend of practicality and a ton of living space while tackling the loop. They come with a lot of different engine packages and modern comforts. You know, a couple of the favorite things that I loved about our room, or I'm sorry, our cruisers, was that our room was in the aft of the boat. We looped with both of our kids in 2020, and so we actually could have a conversation without our children being a part of it. So we actually had separate spaces, which was nice. And then we had a jacuzzi tub. So who needs a boat with a jacuzzi tub? Yeah, we didn't use the jacuzzi very often, but it made for a really big shower, which I appreciated. So those are a couple features of our cruisers that we love. But they're a great boat and a perfect boat to go around the loop in.
Yeah. And how about Bayliner? I think Bayliner kind of gets a bad rap on quality issues, but my understanding and what I hear from loopers that the quality issues that maybe existed with Bayliners were generally in kind of like the smaller runabout type boats, not the motor yachts that we're talking about for the Great Loop. What's your take on that though? Because I could be misinformed.
Yeah, you're not misinformed at all. And I hate that Bayliner gets a bad rap because what
Hmm.
they did really truly changed boating in America, right? I think when they originally came out with some of their smaller boats, I think for $6,000 or $8,000, you could get a 18-foot Bayliner with a trailer, and it brought boating to so many Americans because they made the price point where it was. Now, for that kind of money, are you going to get the greatest quality? Probably not. But their larger boats are fantastic, extremely well built, very seaworthy vessels. They offer an exceptional value because they have such big interiors, good performance. I mean, the same engines they're putting in these Bayliners are the same engines that were in other boats, you know. So the features that they put in the larger Bayliners, which they did end up splitting out that Bayliner brand and making it Meridian, right, to kind of get rid of some of that stigmatism that they had. But they rival more expensive brands and they offer the same quality. It's that smaller boat that was the one that faced so much criticism. So, big fan of the larger Bayliners. The problem is they switched to that Meridian, probably around 2004. And so some of the Bayliners are now the late 90s, which is still fine for the loop. But we probably will see less and less of them though as we progress on, as that brand kind of fades out as far as the bigger boats. But great
Yeah.
boat for the.
Perfect. So that's our top 10. I'll just read them again. Mainship, Carver, Grand Banks, Ranger Tug, Silverton, Sea Ray, Beneteau, Meridian, Bayliner, and Cruisers Yachts. So quite the list this year. I think the takeaways here, Brent, with Ranger Tugs there, and if we looked at how many Nordic tugs also finished, they didn't make the top 10, but there were a few. So the smaller trailerable tugs remain popular, probably, as we said, for people segment looping. And also as insurance restrictions have been more challenging, I think that led to some of those smaller boats because they were easier to get insured. But the other big takeaway here from, this list is it is very heavy on the motor yacht go fast, what we, traditionally we had called the go fast looper boats. So, I think those are two of the big takeaways. The other thing I noticed is absent from the list is one of my favorite boat styles, which is, the pilot house. The Katie Crogans, the Celines, the, beautiful boats that didn't make the list. Do you think that's because they tend to be bigger boats and therefore there aren't as many, or higher price point boats and therefore there aren't as many? Just curious because they're my absolute favorites.
Uh, those pilot house trawlers are so beautiful. I
Hmm.
just Yeah, I mean it's sort of sad, right? Because I look at the boats that are being built today, and I've just recently been to several boat shows, and they just don't build them like they used to, right? And so every year with hurricanes and storms and just boats getting older, there are fewer and fewer of them out there. But they're such great boats and they do hold their value. And so there is some extra cost there. But I sure hope we see a lot of Katie Krogan. The Katie Krogan 42 is a phenomenal boat. The 48, the 58, those are all great boats. The Celine 53 is a favorite. I mean, those are all wonderful trawlers, but just probably not production based like the Carvers, the Meridians, the Sea Rays, the Silvertons, the Rangers, and the main ships were, right? So we
Yeah.
see a little access to those mainline boats, and I think from that perspective, the majority probably rules on that, I guess, right? So they
Right.
were just there's a whole lot more of them. Even the little Katie Krogan 36-foot Manatee is a great little cruising boat for couples, but there were only 99 of them built, and so there's not as many left. And I think of the 99, I don't know how many still survive, right? So
Right.
um, that's kind of an interesting piece, yeah. So a
Yeah.
little more specialized, if you will.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and give our overall loop completion stat for 2024. We had 270 boats complete the Great Loop in 2024. That is another record year. We've been breaking the record every year since about the first year post-COVID. Might have been 2022 because I think 2021 we still had some border closure issues. But 270 boats crossed their wake last year. 264 of those 270 were first time wake crossers. So 264 new gold loopers last year. Six of those boats were completed their platinum loop, which seems like kind of a small number. But I have not compared it to other years. So almost 10%, I believe, more than 2023. So a big number. My guess, if I had to get out, my crystal ball and make a guess, I would say that 2025 may be a little bit lower than 2024. Um, we all thought 2023 was a peak, so I think I'm just coming at that from 2024 was surprised. I was surprised it was higher, and I just feel like there's nowhere for it to go but down. So we shall see. And then these stats will all be on our website. But if you are curious, 7% of the boats were 30 feet and under. This is just the boats that completed last year. So 7% were 30 feet and under. 33% were between 30 and 39 feet. So 33% of the boats were 30 to 39 feet. 49%, so pretty much half of the boats that completed were between 40 and 49 feet. So boats in the 40-foot range seem to be the king here. And then 11% of the boats were 50 feet and above. So a pretty wide range there. But the sweet spot still remains, kind of in that 40-foot range. And that, as we said at the beginning, is the average. So Brent, thank you for helping me walk through these stats today. Always much more engaging to have a discussion about these boats than for me to just sit here and rattle off the stats. So I appreciate you joining me, sharing some of your knowledge. And again, thank you for the Admiral level sponsorship from Great Loop Yacht Sales.
Thanks for having me on, Kim. What a fun show, and what I hope we break records again in 2025. Who knows, right?
Who knows?
We
And
go to
we very
300.
likely could. So
Awesome.
thank you again, Brent, and thank you for everyone who's watched or listened today. We will be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.